He's getting sober? He's really getting sober? Are you like dancing for joy? Jumping? This is solving all those problems you thought you might have had forever? Woohoo! That's super exciting, except for when it's not. I hoped and I believed that when my husband got sober, things would get easier. It didn't, and that was super confusing. Maybe, there was more fighting. Maybe there needed to be shared decisions now. I mean, now you've got a full adult who says, hey, I want to be part of the household again. I want to take care of the children, and I'm going to take on responsibilities. Now you're not running it all by yourself anymore. And then I don't want to call you out, but did the crazies came out? Did you become a nagging, angry, resentful wife? I'm afraid I did. I wanted him sober. I wanted all that to happen. But wow, I got frustrated. And as scripture says, it is better to live on the corner of a rooftop than with a nagging wife. When my husband got sober and I had been taking care of everything and everything there was to take care of, when he got sober, the frustration and the resentments that I felt affected my job, my children, and my self-esteem. There were times I just didn't want to go home. Just dealing with this man who could no longer really deal with himself was exhausting. Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. So people use drugs because they work, because they allow you to soften your emotions, because they allow you to control things. Now, yes, there are angry people. Yes, there are harmful people. But a lot of times, in a lot of situations, this is self-medication. They're just bringing themselves down, calming themselves down. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that they use it because it works. And when they come off of that, suddenly they don't know how to have feelings anymore. They're not sure who they are, where they are, what they're doing. So whether it be foods, drugs, alcohol, sex, workaholism, their nervous system doesn't know how to calm down. So when they're not using the drug of their choice, they're like vibrating, like that little bunny that used to bounce along, or the little chicks you wind up at Easter. They're just vibrating. And if you're an empathetic person, if you're an empathetic wife, which a lot of us are that choose to marry addicts, then we feel that bouncing and that vibration, and it causes us no end of distress. We vibrate with them because here's the strange thing. When he got sober, that means I had to do something about me. So now it's your turn to get sober. Is that terrorizing? Did I just scare you? If staying married and staying with the addict who is recovering, you chose this man for a reason in the beginning. Maybe he wasn't using as much when you started. Maybe this really wasn't a play in his book right then. But you started to change as his use got worse and take over everything, control everything, make sure everything was okay. So now that he is sober and life is harder for you, what's your role? I mean, for a while, your identity was taking care of everything while he couldn't manage. Now you don't have that role anymore. So it's kind of like, go with me here. It's kind of like when God delivered the Jews from Pharaoh, the Egyptians, and the 7 plagues. Pharaoh said, okay, you can go. I'll release you from bondage. These plagues are too bad. I'll just let you go. But then who was going to do all the work, right? Who was going to take care of everything? So as he's chasing them across the Red Sea, he's like, no, that wasn't really what I wanted. So that's part of when your husband gets sober. It's part of looking at, is that really what you wanted? Is it turning out the way that you wanted it to happen? Or was it calmer before he did that? And the sticky question is, How sober are you? As bad as you wanted his sobriety, did you really understand? Did you really understand how it would change your role, your identity, and your family? What choices? If you said in the beginning, if he would just pay the bills, if he would come home on time, if he would pay attention to the kids, take me on a date, that's all you wanted, all those things. And maybe now he's doing all that, but he's also saying, maybe we should rework the budget. Maybe you should get a different job. Maybe I should take over some more things. Maybe I should be more of the leader over here, and you should follow my decisions and follow my lead. Well, guess what, buddy? I've been leading for years because you weren't available. So I'm Tanya. I'm a former world champion, nagging wife, blamer, shamer, control freak, and perfectionist. I took care of everything. Nice to make your acquaintance. I'm sure we could have a good game of Have you ever? Have you ever been so crazy that you shot guns off in the backyard? Have you ever been so crazy that laying hands on his pot plants and willing them to die was your Christmas gift to Jesus? No, that's just me. Maybe it is. Oftentimes, the person who has been dealing with this looks just as crazy, if not crazier, than the person who has had the self-medicating use of whatever they chose to use. And like I said earlier, Scripture says it is better to live in the corner of the rooftop than to live with a nagging wife. That's Matthew 7:24-27. Are you that wife? Because I sure was. When the Jews left slavery, they left Egypt and they're headed to the promised land. What do? They get what they think they want. In fact, they get sent off with gold and jewels and money from the Egyptians, and they head out. Pharaoh chases them. They get out there, and within a couple weeks, they start to grumble and complain. It was more work, more responsibility, more effort than anyone knew was going to be. And where were their melons and their bread and the things that they had grown accustomed to? Yes, they were slaves and now they were free, but they had manna. Who can numb out with manna? I mean, manna is supposedly a very flat flour cracker that doesn't have a whole lot going for it, really. And so God answered your prayer with sobriety, because I know you've been praying for that. I prayed for years for that. But then I'm like, who is this man? This is my answer to prayer? I'm not sure I know this person. God, is this a joke? Is this like manna? All this is going to change. I'm not sure if I want to go back to how we were. I mean, it was easier, kind of. Slavery, but easier. So underneath all this, are you the woman who wants to finally heal her marriage and her family and serve God during this recovery process for generations to come? From addiction use, from the hurts, habits, and hangups that are bound to be underneath there. We don't use drugs unless there's a problem. At some point, it doesn't become fun anymore, and you keep using because it keeps working. So are you that woman that you want to be cherished by your husband? You want to serve your God. You want to love your family and create a generational legacy of love and support. Are you that woman? I am. I want to be that cherished woman. But the change was really scary. In our story, my husband had used for a long, long time, since teenage years. I knew, and then I thought he got sober, but he had kept using the whole time. So I'd never really known him. He'd never known himself. He'd never known himself sober at all. So this was a huge change for him. And Al-Anon tells us that living with an alcoholic is too much for most of us. I'm going to put a little twist on that. Too much for most of us. Think about the alcoholic himself. He has to live with himself. He has to be there for himself. He has to see himself. If it's too much for me on the outside, think about how much it is for him on the inside. He must just be crawling out of his skin. Let me ask you this. Now that he is learning to accept life on life's terms without his standard coping mechanisms, how are you doing with your coping mechanisms? Who do you want to be? The nagging wife? The cherished wife? Now, I had to look up cherished, honestly, because I knew that I wanted something more than just to be loved, just to be wife. I wanted to be cherished, and cherished means held dear, esteemed, honored, valued. How long has it been since you've been valued in this relationship? Maybe occasionally when it got so bad, he thanked you for doing all you're doing, or maybe you just got angry, but valued. And throughout scripture, it talks about the value of a wife. In Proverbs 31, it talks about who can find an excellent wife. She is far more precious than jewels. So cherished, jewels, you are precious because the heart of the husband trusts in you and he will lack no gain. So I know that you've been holding the family together. I know that you are trustworthy. Are you ready to make the change that it's going to take to support your husband through this process? And then the next question is, how? He is changing. So here's something that clinched it for me. Dr. Robert Myers, in his book on sobriety, says that family members who choose to work on their issues first are the addict's best hope of staying clean. You are your addict loved one's, your husband's best hope of staying clean. As I promised, I'm going to give you some mind-blowing shift perspectives. And thanks for hanging out with me for this long. Are you ready? Because I've already challenged you on how sober you are. Are you sure you're ready to really shift your mindset? Okay. You, just you, not your preacher, not your therapist, not your guidance person, not your friends, not extended family. You, as his wife, are the expert on your immediate family and your recovering loved one. In fact, you probably know him since he's just learning his feelings and how to work through these things, how to deal with tough situations, tough days at work, financial issues, dealing with you and the kids. Without his coping mechanisms, you know his trigger points, you know his anger points, you know when he is overwhelmed probably better than he does. So, beloved, you intuitively know the patterns, the triggers, and the desires of your loved one's heart at this moment, probably better than he does. You are the expert. Instead of throwing your hands up and saying, I don't know what to do, now it's time for you to step in and get this. This is the second mind shift. First, it was you're the expert. 2, it's do less. That's exactly what I said. Do less. You've been holding it all together, doing everything, making it happen. And guess what? Doing less is the next shift. So, to stop triggering him, stop triggering your whole family, stop acting like a crazy person, not doing your self-care, shooting guns off in the backyard, totally me. You've got to stop doing everything for everybody. Yes, there will be some problems. In fact, one person said, I gave him the laundry to do. He wasn't doing the laundry, wasn't doing the laundry, wasn't doing the laundry. In fact, he went out and bought his own underwear, new underwear, so he didn't have to do the laundry. I went out and bought my underwear, so I didn't have to do the laundry. Finally, he broke down and did the laundry, but she had to wait him out. She had to wait him out. How hard would that be for you to do? To give over those responsibilities and say, look, these are your responsibilities. I'm not going to step in and take over for you. I'm not going to control. I'm not going to nag. I'm not going to make sure it gets done. I'm not going to take care of everybody. I am going to step back. You can keep breathing now. If you want to create space for a joyful, loving family, you gotta turn loose. You now have a partner who is able to handle things, who is able to take on responsibilities. You've got to allow for that to happen. How badly do you want that legacy of healthy families for your children and their children and the next generation of children? What happened in the story of Moses and Pharaoh and the Exodus? That first generation could not pull it together. They didn't get to see the promised land because they kept with their old ways. They kept with their grumbling, kept building altars. They wandered around. It technically, get this, it technically was 2 weeks from Egypt to the promised land if you had walked straight over there. Check it out. They've got archaeological digs and all that stuff around that. Technically, it was 2 weeks. God kept them wandering for 40 years. Beloved, you don't want to be wandering for 40 years. You are the expert and you need to do less. Those two mind shifts for you to be the cherished wife, not the nagging wife. So let me tell you a little secret. This is the third secret. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. I think you know that, but you don't believe it. So let me add something that you need to say to yourself morning and evening. You are creative, resourceful, and whole just as you are, just as God made you. That means that you can turn to Him and that you can be the loving, cherished wife instead of, like me, the championship nag. You have everything you need to make this shift. Now, everyone needs a guide. Everyone needs somebody to help co-create with them. That's part of addiction, is when we stop connecting and when we pull away and when we connect only with our choice of numbing agent. So don't do that, beloved. Make sure that you step in and you connect with someone. Now, there's a lot of things out there. There's Al-Anon, there's Celebrate Recovery. There are all kinds of wonderful things to connect with, and those will help build you up. If you are looking for the way out of the wilderness, find that connection. So let's recap. Here's what I want you to do. Remember, you are the expert. That's not lord it over him. That's not be the boss. That's just be aware. Next, do less. Can you imagine that? Do less. Let him begin to pull his weight. Let him begin to manage the things he needs to manage, even if the countertops are dripping and the dishes don't get washed correctly and the clothes don't get done and you have to go out and buy new underwear. Do less. And finally, find a place to connect. Find a place where you telling your story, nobody's going, oh, I can't believe that was happening, you poor dear. Where your story is part of the common story. If you've sat in any of these rooms, you know that your story is part of the common stories. Find that connection. If you're not finding that connection locally, let's talk a little bit more and see how I can help you. We've designed a whole Dancing with Joy program. It may be something for you, it may not be something for you, but as you are doing the exodus out of addiction, you have a responsibility too. You Instead of making it harder on yourself, you need to be like Miriam with her tambourine. She danced, she sang, they were excited. Stay in that place. Stay in that excited place, knowing that you're the expert, knowing that you need to be doing less, and making sure you're connecting. Again, I'm Tanya, and hey, this is your time to dance with joy and create that family legacy where you are the cherished wife. You are the beloved of your husband, and your children will call you blessed.